Gutters are among the most fundamental elements of comics. In my opinion, they are also the most powerful considering their subtlety. Gutters can be skillfully created to express emotions and time, as is brilliantly done in the comic The Amazing Spider-Man 2013, issue 1 by David Morrell and Klaus Janson. In this issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, David Morrell, the writer, depicts Spider-Man or Peter Parker overwhelmed by his duties as a superhero. Spider-Man is tired and distressed at first and improves towards the end to his normal self. Klaus Janson, the artist, supports Morrell's narrative with dexterous use of gutters to express time and emotions in the story. But first, let's see what are gutters and how they affect our interpretation of comics. Gutters are the spaces between panels as marked in red. A reader subconsciously interprets gutters for a better understanding of a comic. Generally, width of gutters emphasizes time intervals between panels. Also, background bleeding into gutters as depicted by the gradient sets up the mood for the panels. An example of a bleeding effect is depicted on this slide. To achieve this desired effect, panels are drawn partially over the background, leaving just enough of it visible. This allows for spaces between the panels, the gutters, to be filled in by the background. Then gutters literally act as channels, taking a stream of mood or emotions from the background to the panels. For example, on this page, panels are drawn over an image representing a dull landscape of a city. The background bleeds into the gutters, blending the dullness of the weather with the depressed emotions of Spider-Man. Had the background image been in a separate panel at the bottom of the page, it could have confused the reader about its meaning in relation to the panels above. Similarly here, placing the background image in a separate panel would make the transition between panels ambiguous. However, the bleeding effect relates the running people's desire for comfort to that of Peter Parker. Because of not only the weather but also his moral duties as Spider-Man, Peter feels tired. He requires rest and thus finds comfort in sleeping. Gutters may also express time apart from emotions. Wide gutters tend to separate two different periods in time. The large width of gutters does so by introducing a pause in the comic. This pause is like the one which we experience when we gradually return to reality from a daydream. That period of transition from a dream to reality is visually mimicked as a wide gutter. First few pages of the comic depict Spider-Man in distress and self-reflecting upon his heroic acts. Here the white gutters are followed by the black panel outlines exclusively around panels depicting Spider-Man. This separates his thoughts from the present narrative. The white gutters act as cues for the reader's mind to return to the present narrative from the flashbacks of memory. Gutters also help bring out the ill-tempered character Mr. Jameson, Peter Parker's employer. This page shows a conversation between Peter and Mr. Jameson. The lack of gutter spaces between rows represents the rapidity of the event. This suggests Mr. Jameson does not offer Peter much time to think for himself. Instead, Peter receives snappy orders from his employer. Furthermore, relatively narrow gutters break down the conversation between Peter and Mr. Jameson. More panels with gutters reflect the short and curt tone of Mr. Jameson. Such a use of panels with gutters suggests a strict stepwise manner in which he dismisses Peter Parker. Hence, gutters too express Mr. Jameson's character to support the narrative. This contrasts with the conversation Peter has with his relative Aunt May. Here there are at most two panels per row, and horizontal gutters are wider than the vertical gutters. This is visually easier for the eyes to read as compared to the previous image. Hence, the gutters seek to compare the reader's comfort in reading the comic with Peter's comfort, who feels at peace at his aunt's home. Furthermore, there are many instances in the comic where there are no gutters between the panels. This is a deliberate choice made by the artist to describe the concurrence of events. However, this technique is different from the bleeding effect which was discussed before. Overlapping panels with no gutters brings out the scene-to-scene transitions, while the bleeding effect conveys the mood. For example, the overlap of small panels over the first large panel expresses scenes that differ in space but related in time. Also, the regular spacing between the small panels establishes a time relation among them. Furthermore, these deductions are supported by the TV news in the speech bubbles that leads from one panel to the next, indicating a time relation among the various panels. Similarly, here at the bottom of the page, gutters are missing and the small panels overlap the panel depicting Peter. The regular spacing among the small panels suggests a time relation among them. However, the overlap more significantly expresses the concurrence of all events happening outside Peter's house, depicted in small panels, with his act of watching TV. The artist of the comic has included another type of overlap of panels. Unlike the previous case, here gutters around the overlapping panels are maintained. As shown, the artist has used this strategy a few times. This type of overlaps puts special emphasis on scenes inside the overlapping panels in context of the panels it overlaps. The winter storm is seen to adversely affect the civilians, and the sense of urgency is expressed in the background panels. The artist, through the overlapping panel, puts special emphasis on Peter, who is sleeping comfortably. This increases the suspense by hinting to the readers that the city would soon require Spider-Man, who is resting at home unaware. The tension keeps on mounting as an apartment building catches fire, but Peter remains oblivious to the outside world. The artist merges the effect of two types of overlap to highlight that people need Spider Man. The special emphasis on the desperate situation of the mother, her child, and the disabled is an emotional appeal that features to hook the readers till the end of the comic. The narrative shifts to Peter and Aunt May for the next 4 pages. These pages are unique in the sense that they all have black gutters. Literally, it may signify the power outage, but elsewhere in the comic, dark blue and purple tones are used to depict no light. Hence, more notably, black gutters represents Peter's concern about Aunt May. Finally, Peter's tiredness, illustrated from the beginning of the comic, alleviates. The overlap panel depicting the hand signifies the renewed conviction with which Peter moves towards his moral duties as Spider-Man. Furthermore, the sense of reassurance reflected in the background image bleeds through the gutters over to the panels. Thus, the comic ends on a positive note. Gutters played a significant role in the comic. From expressing Peter Parker's emotions to giving a sense of time, Gutters always supported the narrative and visuals in the panels. Our interpretation of Gutters varied, but their relevance in relation to the comic never decreased. Thus, the simplest of elements of a comic proved to be among its most powerful features.